Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're going to take a look at the Umbreon Shadow Ninetales core in the single type cup, which I think is a very good core right now because there aren't a lot of fighting types. Umbreon being a very good lead because there are so many Cofagrigus, which it does very well against. It also does pretty well against Ninetales. Dragonair even beats Dubwool and Haxorus in the Zero Shields amazingly. And then Ninetales being a very good closer if you can save 2 shields for it because it just embers down so many things. It does struggle against stuff like Vigoroth and Dubwool, which are a bit more bulky, and also dragons and water types of course, but it can ember down a lot of things in the 2 shields. And then I had to go with something which was good against fighting and fairy as the safe swap, so I went with Shadow Muk, which I think was a very good pick yesterday, but today there were simply too many Umbreons and I felt like it was a bit of a liability, so I would probably swap it for a Clefable instead to have a better matchup against Umbreon. I went with Psychic on my own Umbreon because the idea was that if I see a fighting type in the lead, I can safe swap Muk, then bring the opposing Pokemon into a range where I can farm it down with Umbreon and then start unloading Psychics upon the fighting type. And that worked very well against the one fighting type I saw in the lead, but against an Umbreon lead, this team just doesn't work. You need Last Resort, I think that was a bit of a mistake. And also, you need something that can be counter-swapped onto an Umbreon or just do better against Umbreon than Shadow Muk, I think. So I think a fairy type like Clefable with Psychic to deal with the Ninetales as well would probably do better. That being said, I still won 13 out of 25 games with this team, and there were quite a few pretty good ones in between. So let's take a look at them. Going into the first game, we lead into a Haxorus. This is actually not too bad for Umbreon. You really need to stay in with Umbreon because Ninetales really doesn't want to see this. But Umbreon actually wins the Zero Shields against Haxorus because these Breaking Swipes just don't do enough damage. It also takes 5 every time for the Breaking Swipes or Night Slash, so we can go up to the back-to-back foul play and they should be at another one, and they should know that I'm also at another one, so I'm expecting them to try and go for the CMP, so I just go for the extra star instead. And then because this brings me so low, I just go for the move immediately. I could have probably gone for the Psychic. It does a little bit more damage, but I thought a foul play would KO, which it doesn't quite do. But now we can get an energy head start on Muk instead. Didn't want to get farmed down with Umbreon, so we save it for a sack swap later. Then they bring in a regular Muk. In the Shadow Mirror, as in if they're both Shadow, I would recommend going for the Dark Pulse because 1 Dark Pulse is enough to put them into a range where you can farm them down. But against the regular one with a Shadow or the other way around, I would recommend going Thunder Punch because 2 is enough to take out, whereas 1 Dark Pulse doesn't do quite enough damage to put them into a range where you can comfortably farm them down. So do go for the second Thunder Punch right before they get to theirs, but it doesn't quite take out the Muk. But as I say, if you can save 2 shields for Shadow Ninetales, it's going to be able to win a lot of matchups in the back. So bring in the Ninetales, and they bring in a Cofagrigus, and this is a very good matchup for Ninetales, as long as you're not 2 Shadow Claws down. Because even if you're 1 Shadow Claw down, it takes 6/6/6 for the Weather Balls, and it takes 7/6/6 for the Dark Pulses, and you only need 1 move to land. And Ninetales does win CMP, so we should be able to even down 1 fast move. Ninetales should be able to outpace this Cofagrigus. So up 1 fast move, this should be a pretty comfortable matchup. As you can see, 1 Weather Ball plus the Embers is enough to take out this Cofagrigus, and that is a good game. Next game, lead into a Lickitung, very good lead for Umbreon, but they safe swap into a Surface and we counter swap Muk. And this looks very familiar, and I'm already thinking it's probably a Shadow Machamp in the back. And if it is a Shadow Machamp in the back, I really do not want to give them a shield, because as I explained in the last video, Shadow Machamp does very well against something like a Shadow Ninetales in the 1 shield, because you just outpace it, and then they're going to go through my Ninetales. So if I expend the shield, I think I just lose this game. So I actually decided to just let my Muk go, and yeah, now I'm getting my Umbreon onto the Machamp, but I think it's okay. We can farm this down with Ninetales, come out with a lot of energy, and of course they're gonna bring in the Lickitung. But now we can't get up to the overheat before dipping into Umbreon. But it takes 12 turns for the Lickitung to get to the Body Slam, so they get to it on the CMP, which is a bit of a disaster actually, because we need the Ninetales to do something to the Machamp, so I have to keep it alive. So I have to shield this, and now we're in the 1 shield, which is really not good for Ninetales, because now the Machamp will be able to get to the CMP as well. If I let this go, I'm getting my Umbreon onto a Machamp in the 1 shield scenario, which would be a disaster. But if I can grab the shield, I'm getting the Umbreon onto a Machamp in the 0 shield, which is, I just have to hope that the opponent shields this move, because that would be a lot better for my Umbreon. My Umbreon has a play in the Zero Shields because I have done some damage to it with Ninetales. So now we should be able to get to a Psychic. We can take out this Machamp. I also overfarm a little bit just to make sure I can get to a foul play on the Lickitung. But this Psychic does about 84%. So because we've done a little bit of damage with Ninetales, we should be able to take out the Machamp and then get to a foul play on this Lickitung as well. The Machamp would have just swept me if I had gone down a shield with the Muk. So I think that was the only way I could play it. Next game, lead into a Shadow Machamp. As I said at the beginning, save swap, Muk, and they bring in a Hypno. Yikes. I'm thinking a Dark Pulse does about 57%, so they don't necessarily have to shield this. So that's why I'm going for it instead of baiting. Against the Shadow Hypno, I would definitely go for the bait because they have to shield it. But we can't get to the Thunder Punch, which hopefully puts them into a range where Umbreon can farm them down. So I'm just going to bring in the Umbreon, and we get denied a fast move. Which, yeah, the game has been a little bit buggy today, unfortunately. Now we can't overfarm. They luckily don't run Focus Blast. I did run into one Hypno which ran Focus Blast, and it does a lot of damage to Umbreon. And then they swap into Machamp again. So we can get to this Psychic, which does a lot of damage. I was just going to farm down the Hypno, get up to almost 2 Psychics, which would have been a disaster for the Machamp. So I think maybe the opponent realized that and brought in the Machamp. But now we can just almost take it out, bring in the Ninetales. Unfortunately, they get to a cross chop. But then they bring back in the Hypno, indicating that they might be weak to Shadow Ninetales. The Hypno doesn't really hit that hard. This can only be a punch because it takes 4, then 3, then 3. And they simply weren't at a Shadow Ball or anything like that. So we could just let that go. It doesn't do that much damage. And then we have a lot of that energy on Ninetales. And they bring in this Vigoroth. This is not comfortable. If we can land an Overheat, that's amazing. We go for the bait in the first time around. But they decide to no-shield it. So now we can go for another Weather Ball, which will of course grab the shield. But I'm a little bit afraid that they're going to be able to farm down my Ninetales, or at least outpace my Ninetales to a Body Slam, and then also be able to outpace my Umbreon. So actually bring in the Umbreon, thinking that I could survive the counters and the Body Slam and get to this foul play. And that is the case, which is pretty nice. Umbreon is just an absolute tank. So we can take out this Vigoroth, and that is a good game. Next game, lead into Shadow Ninetales. Pretty good lead for Umbreon. The Ninetales does have to land an Overheat in order to win the 1 and 2 shield scenarios. Some people like to Overheat and then dip when they lead a Alola Ninetales, or Shadow Ninetales, I should say. But most people just go for the Weather Balls. Based on how much damage that first foul play did, I don't think another one would be enough to KO from this range, so I would rather overfarm than come out with more energy, just let them get to another Weather Ball. As I say, it's always 6 for the Weather Balls. And then we can go for a little bit more energy and then go for the foul play, which should take out the Ninetales at this point. But now we should be able to get to another move on whatever they bring in. But they bring in a Charm Granbull. And because we have 2 responses to it, we can save the energy on Umbreon and then bring in Muk. And they bring in a Cofagrigus. And because we have the energy on Umbreon, we should just be able to go straight Dark Pulse, because we will be able to land Dark type move on this Cofagrigus even if they have Dark Pulse. It actually turns out they don't have Dark Pulse, they're running Psychic instead. If they're not running Dark Pulse, Muk only needs 1 Poison Jab's head start in order to win this in the 2 shields, straight Dark Pulse. So we should be able to get to 3 Dark Pulses before they get to 3 Psychics or Shadow Balls, because it's 777 for the Psychics or Shadow Balls, and it's 877 for the Dark Pulse. I for some reason let my Muk go. I think I just decided to save the shield for Ninetales really, which wasn't really all that necessary because this Granbull is just not getting to a move because it's so frail. Of course, if it gets to a move, it's gonna do massive damage, but yeah, these charms are not really doing anything, and because it's so frail, we can just get to this Weather Ball and take out the Granbull. That is a good game. Next game, lead into Cofagrigus. I saw so many of these, which was pretty nice. I only decided to showcase one of them, which is this one. They save swap a Samurott, which I think is a very interesting save swap. I might actually try it out. I need to put it into a range where Muk can farm it down, because Samurott can actually win the 2 shields against Shadow Muk, because the Fury Cutters add up so much that 1 Hydro Cannon is enough in the 2 shields. But in the 0s and 1s, we can just shield once and then farm them down because we landed that foul play, and they come out with a lot of energy. I'm thinking that my opponent is probably not gonna shield their Cofagrigus because they know they've lost Switch advantage, so they know it's going up against an Umbreon. So I just go straight for the Dark Pulse instead of going for a bait. And my opponent does decide to just let it go, and unfortunately we don't get to a Thunder Punch. Gonna wait up my switch timer because our switch timers are misaligned, so I want mine to come up before bringing in Umbreon. And then they farm up a little bit of energy, and then they bring in a Meganium. And this was a little bit of an RPS game, but it is also still not quite over. It takes 9 for the first Earthquake, and then 8 if you throw a Frenzy Plant first. So 6 for the Frenzy Plant, and then 8 for the Earthquake. I'm thinking even if they bait me here, I'm going to be able to outpace to another Weather Ball, and I'm going to be able to do so much damage with the Ninetales that Umbreon should comfortably deal with it. So I think it was a pretty safe shield, because as I say, 6 for the Frenzy Plant, then 8 for the Earthquake. So we can outpace, get to this Weather Ball on CMP, then this Earthquake will of course take out Ninetales, but we've just embered them so far down in health that Umbreon should very comfortably be able to deal with this. And of course, also the Cofagrigus in the back. So take out the Meganium, and then we can just farm up to another Foul Play. I think the opponent had quite a bit of energy, but yeah, obviously Cofagrigus just can't do anything here. So we get to another Foul Play to take out the Cofagrigus, and that is a good game. Next game, lead into a Core Breaker, Registeel. This is a bit of a Core Breaker, which I didn't really talk about in the beginning of the video. Both Umbreon and Muk have a very tough time dealing with this, but it's just so rare. I've only seen 2 people use this in the lead, so I feel like it's pretty okay to be weak to it in the lead, or ABA weak to it. Umbreon also doesn't have like that bad of a matchup, also, as well as they go for a Zap Cannon. I think this is the correct play against an Umbreon, because you need 2 moves to KO an Umbreon anyways, so you might as well go for the attack debuff on the first one, so these Foul Plays do less damage. And then they let me get to another Foul Play. I think they had another move stored, but they can just take it and then farm up to 100 energy. If the Registeel is at 100 energy and they throw a Focus Blast, they will always be at least 10 turns away from the next move, unless they're running Flash Cannon. So that's a good thing to be aware of for later on. As they bring in a Ninetales on our Ninetales, of course they know that we're going to be weak against Registeel in the back, because we stated with Umbreon, go for the Overheat and dip, just either do massive damage or grab a shield, but now the Ninetales has a lot of energy. I think my opponent made a bit of a mistake here by going for the move so late, because now I can CMP tire them on the next one. They would have been able to get off 2 if they had gone for it 1 fast move earlier, but now they have to either spend the shield on Ninetales or just let me take it out before getting off any of that energy, and then they bring in Cofagrigus to farm me all the way down. We do get off a Thunder Punch, which is pretty nice, but they come out with a lot of energy on this Cofagrigus. We still have 2 shields, and as I say, the Registeel must be at least 9 turns away from another move, because I did do 1 more lock on. So we should be able to either farm down this Cofagrigus before it gets to 3 moves, or farm down the Registeel and then come out with 2 Weather Balls if they bring it in, because they're just not getting to another move here before we get the farm down, and then we come out with 2 Weather Balls. And we overcome a Registeel lead, and that's very nice. Next game, lead into a Dubwool. Umbreon wins the Zero Shield here. If you have a good Umbreon, that is. If you maximize the Umbreon on PvPoke, you'll see that it wins the Zero Shields against Dubwool. And Dubwools generally don't like to shield, so I would count this as a pretty positive matchup actually. As we're just gonna see some Foul Plays, and Body Slams is a pretty boring, long matchup, not gonna lie. You can just go 3 Foul Plays here. It takes 3 for every Body Slam, 4 for the Wild Charge, 5 for the Payback. So we should be able to get, they should be able to get to another Body Slam here, right before we get to another one. But then we can just get to the Foul Play to take them out afterwards, because we have a good enough Umbreon. And then a very important thing to be aware of, as I say, Ninetales can take out Cofagrigus if the Cofagrigus only gets 1 Shadow Claw's head start. I accidentally pressed the wrong place in the screen, so I swapped in my Ninetales too late, so now they're going to be able to outpace me. And then I also go for a pretty big mistake here. I go for the Weather Ball on CMP, which you can win the 2 shields with Ninetales against Cofagrigus, but if they no-shield this, I'm gonna have to expend 2 shields and not grab any shields of theirs, and now come out with a lot less energy, meaning I can threaten this Muk a lot less. If I had not thrown that move and then just shielded, I would have come out with a lot more energy to threaten this Muk, and then grab both shields from this Muk. But because I spent that energy on Cofagrigus, I came up with a lot less energy, and they still got off their move to force my shield, which is basically a disaster. Because now they should just be able to get to a Dark Pulse on my Muk, no problem, to take it out or put them into range where they can farm me down. It does about 54%. So I have to make a catch, try to go for the catch, and it doesn't succeed. And now they can't just... I think my opponent wasn't quite aware of how much a Dark Pulse did here, because they just go for the Thunder Punch, which is the safe play because they had 2 of them. So yeah, that's a GG. That was the last battle for today, and overall I'm not really sure I would recommend this team, although I did go positive with it. It's just too weak to Umbreon, especially because I was running Psychic over Last Resort. I would probably recommend Last Resort if you do want to try it out. If you're not seeing a lot of Umbreons, I think this team could actually work pretty well, but I was just seeing too many of them and it was very tough to overcome. You can also flip it around and use Ninetales as a lead and then Dragonite and Umbreon in the back, which I suggested in my top teams video. I see Junkus has had a lot of success with that team, so maybe try and take a look at his video. Other than that, fun fact of the day, Shadow Ninetales beats Haxorus, Cofagrigus, Shadow Mog, all the fighters, and all the other things that you would expect it to beat in the Zero Shields. So just to say, it's not just good in the 2 shields, it can also be very good in the Zero Shields if you set it up correctly. Other than that, if you like what you see or feel like you learned something, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.